that a piece of it? In other words, are students taught not just for their own activities, what to engage in and what not to engage in, but how to look for friends or classmates who may be in trouble, and sort of some education there about what to look for in friends and when it's appropriate to report to teachers what you see what they might see other classmates doing or engaging in. Is that a part of the education program? Should it be part of the education program in schools?
It is part of the comprehensive bullying prevention and education programs that are now being used in schools.
But I want to make clear that risk identification is really hard. So that it's one thing to kind of mobilize bystanders and say, hey, something's going on, this kid's being bullied and we need to stop it. But not all kids that show risk signs actually engage in risky behavior. So that is to say that, as we know, not all kids who are harassed are distressed. Not all kids who are distressed because they're harassed. So identifying that group of kids is difficult, but there are things to do, like mobilization. I think also one thing to think about is how we can extend services offline, online. So, for example, where do kids go to get support in the community? And what if we also created an online community, extended that community to online? One example would be, say, the suicide hotline, 1-800-SUICIDE, which is, there's data to suggest that it actually does make an impact. People call, and it does prevent suicide. What if there was a chat? So the kids who are online and suicidal, instead of having to pick up the phone, are able to chat. That's how they communicate now. So just kind of thinking about ways that we can extend traditional services into the online world.
The difficulty with a lot of the sort of collective behaviors, for example, even in the school, the bullies tend to have power in the school. The adults tend to actually support them having power in the school, because often these are the jocks. These are the people who have structural power within the school who are engaged in a lot of the bullying. And, those in those dynamics, nobody wants to get in the middle of it because they don't want to be the victim of the jock just for backing the sort of dweeb or whatever dynamic it is in the situation. The same goes out online, because these are people they know in school. And so even getting them to collectively intervene, the kids who do intervene are the really well-intentioned kids, and there is some success there. The difficulty for me is I don't look at even some of the intervention, but be like, those kids who are bullying, they are in trouble. They are engaged in that very problematic behavior because they're usually getting bullied themselves by some other, adult in their life. So stopping it isn't just a matter of, intervening at that level. It's about figuring out the broader systemic problem that is motivating this, sort of dog kick dog kind of behavior. And that's really difficult because this goes back to, more often than not, absent parents, absent on many different levels, will, prompt that kind of attitude. And so this is where it becomes a more systemic issue, which, is, as a researcher is fascinating, and as a lawmaker has to be frustrating as anything, because there's not just one thing that will sort of put in and solve the problem.
Someone just got to pick. Yes.
I have a question about effective methods of messaging for a target audience that you've identified or targeted market to. How are we going to engage them in ways so that they get the messages that we want them to get?
We partner with advertisers who figured it out. I think as vilified, for rightfully so as they are, cigarette companies figured it out. So it's not that it can't be done, and it's not that people don't know how to do it. It's that we need to form partnerships. We need to get good people who are good at what they do all together in the same building. And I think that we need to be careful that people who don't know what they're doing recognize that and not try and do it. So that we should get people who know how to message to kids because they've done it, they've sold other products. We should partner with them to get them to sell healthy behavior.
And also remember that it's a moving target. I think once I just think about the whole brain on drugs, which was successful for the first year or two it was out, and then it kind of morphed into kind of a collective joke. This is your brain on drugs with a side of bacon. It's you have to keep your message moving and remember that teens are changing a lot. Coolness changes, and you and every marketer who's trying to market to teens is trying to figure out how to do exactly what you want to do.
The other thing is,
build on that question? I hear a lot in a lot of different circles based on the question, how do you message to teens? And keying off of Paul's question, is a lot of what I hear is people saying what we need to do is try to enlist teens to message to other teens the appropriate messages. What do you think about peer messaging?
Depends on the status of the peer. I mean, that's the difficulty, right? You have the, like, goody two-shoes kids messaging, you're not going to get very far. The interesting thing that has worked that I've been playing with is luckily I have the opportunity to work with a lot of different groups within my space. And one of the groups that I work with is bands. And one of the games that I play with bands, I mean, celebrity really matters to these kids, whether we like it or not. One of the dumb things that I do is that I get, like, some of the cool bands to leave comments on, like, Geeky Kids pages, which amazingly raises their status and gives them sort of like something that they're really stoked about. And just what it does to sort of balance out the dynamics. And so some of it is about recognizing the structure. It's not just pure messaging in a broadcast, but we live in a Web 2.0 era. These kids are participating in a Web 2.0 era. It's about doing these relational engagements. And if you can leverage, meaningful celebrities to do some of these interactions to rebalance some of the social dynamics, it's impressive what can be done in the classroom.
So all we have to do is get Bono off of the Africa thing and on to the...
Bono is not quite the right target right now.
Stephen?
Just interested to know if any of the academic research or the street research has been looking into some of the virtual worlds, like Second Life and some of the massively multiplayer online games, and what's going on there and what we should or shouldn't. I mean, I was curious about your digital street outreach. I can imagine an avatar flying in and saying, don't do that. What's the research and what would be a good way to reach out in those spaces?
So what we know of Second Life, I know that everybody's fetishizing it to no end right now. Second Life is not a place where most teens are hanging out. The teens that are hanging out are the geeky teens. You don't have to worry about, by and large, the teens that are currently hanging out on Second Life, and I don't see it picking up anytime soon. World of Warcraft is a different game. A totally different beast. World of Warcraft is often the ostracized kids. It becomes their social space. It is a different kind of geeky kid, and it is a very masculine environment where you gain status by being this huge orc and you can kind of run around and beat up people in the game. There's, in some ways it's an amazing outlet for people, and it's also one of the few spaces other than church where I've seen genuine age diversity in a social activity, which I have to say is a blessing, because we don't have situations where people are running around with older people. And so the kids who are running around and WoW actually have more street outreach than anybody else, because there's a lot of, well-meaning adults who are like, don't do that. You're not helping the guild. And so when you have really good guild masters who are sort of looking out and being like, stop being a 13-year-old, amazing things happen. And actually, some of the dynamics in there are unbelievably healthy. And I've been astounded by it. Research is really in its nascent stages. Most of it is done by the people called Terra Nova, Terranova. They do an amazing job of documenting everything that they're doing online, so it's really accessible. And they're just finding, it's bridging parent-child gaps for a lot of parents are participating with their kids.
Okay.
It is one of the few places online where it's okay to be in a whole room full of strangers, because guilds are by and large strangers, not people you know offline. And it's been really, really healthy for the kids that participate, but I don't see it as something that I expect to see all kids participating in. But for the kids who've been participating, there's some problematic behavior that seeps through, but a lot of it's been in check in better ways than a lot of other sites.
Just to put that in perspective, so we ask kids, what are the two activities you do online that you spend most time doing? So pick two. 17% said social networking sites, but 47% said playing games. So it's common activity for a lot.
But most of the games that they play are not, they're casual, what are called casual games, which means that they're playing against a computer. They're playing,